Hey guys, what is up? I'm so glad to be back, and I thought we'd bring back the Embrace Nerd show. Now, there's a lot we got to cover. There's a lot of movie news that I have not been up to date on when it comes to this channel that I need to correct. And so today with the Embrace Nerd show, that is basically the only thing we're going to be covering is all the DC movie news that I have been absent on that I think needs to be addressed and talked about. And so I hope you're down for the ride with me. And I'm so excited to have this discussion with you. And in the future, hopefully, we'll be talking about shows and comic books and video games as well. But without further ado, let's get into it. So, the first thing I want to mention is asking the question of how is the box office doing for Superman? And I don't think it's like a perfect number at all. It needs to definitely be higher in my view of things, but hopefully that means you'll get there. I'll be happy. I'll be amazingly happy if it hits like 700 million. I will be satisfied if it hits 600 million. But right now, worldwide, we're looking at 426 million dollars at the box office currently. Now, we're going to have to see how bad it's going to get hurt when Fantastic Four comes out, which is today. Me and my wife are actually going to go see that not too far from now. A couple hours from now, we're going to be going and seeing Fantastic Four for the first time. I've wanted to see Superman more than just once, but right now, currently, that's all I've really been able to go see it is one time. And so I really do wanted to do more. I wanted to make more money. But I think this has less to say about Superman itself. And I think a lot of things that have been going on in the movie theaters, I think it's just an issue that the theaters and the studios have lost the trust with the audience. And the audience is just not going to the movie theaters like they used to. They would rather wait at home. They would rather wait to see these movies on streaming, which the reality is if they wait on streaming, they're not going to get these kind of movies, which is where it gets into the scary aspect of this. But I'm hoping that a movie like Superman, I'm hoping that the reception it got, the positivity that it mostly got, you had a few nitpicks here and a few nitpicks there. Some people were upset that are like really strong Snyder fans, which, I love Man of Steel too, but I still really enjoyed this movie. I'm hoping that the next couple movies they start putting out, I hope earns the trust of the audience. And I'm hoping this not only will do well here, but when it finally goes on streaming, I'm hoping that a lot of people want to check it out and support the movie. But we'll just have to wait and see. But I just thought I'd bring that up just to let everyone know that right now, Superman is currently at least when it comes to July 24th, that the worldwide box office is $426 million. So, the next thing I want to talk about is something that I randomly saw and I had kind of forgot about, to be honest. I remembered they were talking about this, and it seems like they're actually going to put this movie out in cinemas. Which, these are the type of movies that I'm going to pull this up so everyone can see it. Okay, guys. Let's get back to what we were doing. And the next thing I want to cover is James Gunn interviews. Okay? There was a lot of James Gunn interviews that have came out, and too many to count. And what I've thought of is I was like, you know what? How about we do a rundown of just kind of overseeing a bunch of different projects and us just reacting to this minute thing from Josh Horowitz podcast, Happy, Sad, Confused. He was interviewing James Gunn, and James Gunn, they did a kind of quick fire thing, and I thought this would be a cool way to go over some of the news about things that are happening, things that maybe aren't happening, and what's going on overall with some of the projects with the DC Universe. So without further ado, let's check.
Just run down a few others. You tell me as much as you want or not. So, like, are we anywhere on like a Wonder Woman script? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You feel like there's a take, there's a direction.
Yes.
That feels distinct from what we've seen before.
Yeah. Very. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm excited very, very excited about Wonder Woman right now.
Do you anticipate seeing something like a new Flash, a new Aquaman in the next few years, or is that a little ways off?
I wouldn't say the next 2 years for either of those characters.
Okay. The Authority still on your mind?
Yeah, but that's been a rough road.
A slower one.
Yeah,
just harder to crack, harder to.
Yeah, the writer moved on to another project in the DCU that I think he's really killing right now. So
okay, and that project would be
another movie
that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Swamp Thing. Has Mangold delivered a script?
We talked to James the other day. So no, he hasn't delivered a script. It's
okay.
He's been distracted with his billions of movies.
Yes,
but I think we're talking about it again. So,
and Sergeant Rock seemed like it was very close. Mm-hmm. Do you still have hopes that it's going to come back around relatively soon?
Hugely.
Okay.
I'm really excited about Sergeant.
And with Luca still involved?
No.
Okay.
That real quick. So a couple things I think it's important to cover. Let's get back over here. A couple things. And I didn't cover this video. But we'll come back to that. I would say that the Authority seems to not be going too great. I think we can all agree on that it's not going well. I have a theory that the guy who's working on that secret Deathstroke Bane movie might have been the one working on the Authority. And if not, because that script was supposedly done and turned in. So if that Deathstroke Bane script's really good and was turned in and was done well, and it was not by the same writer, I would be kind of interested just to get that writer and put him over on Authority, because I do think that James Gunn has a Kingdom Come type idea that he's trying to get towards. Now, I kind of have a theory that it's a little bit of a Kingdom Come, Justice League New Frontier combination. That's kind of what I'm feeling. Kind of like we're fighting amongst ourselves, but actually there's this greater evil out there lurking. That's kind of my theory. I think they're literally just copying Game of Thrones in that kind of way. But you need the Authority to help make that work. And if you because you can start setting up the different philosophies the different heroes have, so when they finally have to deal with each other, there's going to be some contention between their moralities and where they stand on certain things. And so I do want the Authority to come out, but, you know, the way James Gunn has said, man, he's like, if the scripts ain't good, we ain't doing it. We ain't doing it till the script's good. So hopefully they'll give someone who can really get the vision of what Authority needs to be and really bring it to life, because I do think, definitely not for kids. Authority does not need to be for kids. But I think Authority could be a really good movie that could, you know, be a movie that us adults can go see and enjoy and check out. Something similar, not humor Deadpool, but violence and maturity of something like Deadpool, I think could be really cool. And this would be the thing to do it with. This would be the thing to do it with. And plus, like I said, progression to what his final goal is. I think Authority is important. So hopefully they can get to that sooner rather than later. The next thing I wanted to point out is Aquaman and The Flash will be a pause for a while. I think those were some of the last characters, besides Shazam and Black Adam. They were some of the last characters that we really dealt with within the DCEU. And so I think James Gunn just wants to let those characters breathe for a little while. And he wants to establish his Batman, his Superman, and his Wonder Woman. And I think that's what's really important to him, and that these other characters will come in their time. And I think they're going to have to really think about how they're going to budget those characters. Do I think Flash needs to be a $40 million movie like Clayface? No, I don't. But do I think it needs to be a $200, almost $300 million budget? Definitely not. Definitely not. So they're going to have to figure these characters out and figure out the budgets for them and how to do them. And they honestly need to grow. I think Aquaman and The Flash is the same thing like Batman Beyond. People were really upset why Batman Beyond wasn't being made. But to do Batman Beyond and to really give it justice and really put in the money and the time and the effort into it, they need more money. They need to grow financially as a studio to be able to have the capital to do something like that. Because I think we forget. Now, I believe the stock of Warner Brothers has gone up as a whole, but Warner Brothers has been struggling in the past couple years. They've had a lot of wins this year. A lot of wins when it came to the box office. They had a lot of wins, which is great. But, you know, they don't need to be taking as many risks as we even think they're taking. We may think they're taking way too many risks, but the reality is that they're being very precise and very deliberate in the things they're doing. I think James Gunn is cracking the whip on these scripts. I think he's getting an inventory, his magazine full. So once some of these movies start really progressing and doing really well financially, they can start jumping out different movies and still keeping within the framework that they want to do, which is like, I believe, 2 live action movies, 1 animated movie, 2 live action shows, and maybe like 1 animated show, something like that. Or maybe it was 2 animated shows. But I think they need time, and then eventually when those things happen, then they'll look at Aquaman, then they'll look at Flash. But we'll get into a story later where Gorilla Grodd is going to come into the picture, so maybe those characters will come sooner than later, but I do think it's safe to say, especially the layout of every these couple movies, only doing like 2 live action movies a year, I have a feeling that we're going to be waiting on Aquaman and Flash for a couple of years, which is okay. That's okay. Swamp Thing. I think we can say Swamp Thing is a someday. I think that the director is the guy that they have to do it, the one that directed Indiana Jones, and he directed 4v Ferrari. I think he's got a lot on his plate. You know, he was contracted to do the Star Wars film, and I think they want him to do Swamp Thing. I don't know if they're in a rush to do Swamp Thing, and I think they have a budget in mind for Swamp Thing. I think Swamp Thing is going to be a similar budget to something like Clayface, which will be perfect for that director. and he'll probably give us a really great experience, a really great movie, but they're not necessarily in a rush to do it. And so I think we'll see, well, there's a possibility that even though Swamp Thing, they have a director set who intends to write the script and all those things, you know, depends on what goes on with his Star Wars movie. I think that we could see Swamp Thing at the same time we might see Aquaman and Flash. So we might be waiting on that for a little while. And I guess I'm okay with that. I like the idea of these lower budget movies that we get. Honestly, I could be okay with 3 live action films a year, but just make one of the live action films these cheaper $40 million movies. I think that'd be really special, really unique, and I would be okay with that. But I think they're going to stick to their 2 live action movies a year, and they just got a lot of important things that they need to do before then. So I think it's okay that we wait a little while for that. The next thing he mentioned was Sergeant Rock. I'm actually really pleased that Sergeant Rock is going to go forward. The coolest thing about Superman to me, and if you watch my spoiler video, you'll hear about this, is I love the opening crawl setting up the world of the DC universe for the movies. And one of the interesting things was that it's been 300 years since recorded sightings of metahumans. Now, Sergeant Rock, I do not believe, is a metahuman, but he'll be in a world that metahumans are present and were very active during World War II. And so I do think, for example, if we have Sergeant Rock, we're definitely going to have G.I. Robot in that movie. You know, I like the idea that we have these period pieces that kind of help fill out that world of the DC universe. And we'll make it a grander, bigger world. Make it a world that feels like Star Wars. I think that's amazing. And so I'm really excited about that. You know, Luca not being a part of it, you know, could be a bummer. I think he was really hoping to do something different than the things that he usually does. And it sounded like an interesting mix, you know. There's ways that maybe it couldn't be, but it sounded like a very interesting mix. And so I personally was really excited for it. So I'm really happy that that is something they're still looking at. I have a feeling that next summer we're going to hear that Sergeant Rock is being filmed. I think, from my understanding, they were getting ready to shoot, but there was a certain time, they needed a time period of shooting that the season was not going to cover for. And they needed a certain weather and climate and all those things. And so I think that we're going to see this get filmed next summer. And it probably won't be with Luca, but it will be with someone. And I'm really excited about that. So we'll have to see what's going on with that. The next thing is what he mentioned actually at the very beginning of the video, which was Wonder Woman. And I saved this for last because we have news on this. Ana Nogueira, the same person that wrote Supergirl, the same person that wrote Teen Titans, has now been writing Wonder Woman. That's what she's working on currently. And they seem to be happy with her. Now, we don't know. I have not watched the short film that she wrote. I need to check it out to get my feeling on how she is as a writer. But they seem to be extremely happy with Supergirl. That's the reason they did it, was because the script was so good. And from my understanding, she did turn in her Teen Titans script. So I have a feeling the Teen Titans script is in the back burner. I feel like they will not do a Teen Titans movie until after Batman Brave and the Bold is filmed. I think there's a possibility that they will film, maybe they even film Batman Brave and the Bold and Teen Titans at the same time, or around the same time, to keep some of those actors, you know. But I think we're going to have to wait a little while for Teen Titans, but we may even see Wonder Woman before we see Teen Titans. But it sounds like it was turned in, at least. And Nogueira is now writing Wonder Woman. So they seem to be really happy with her, with everything she's doing. And they keep on giving her opportunities, which I think is really cool. Now, I'm not going to play the video. I encourage you to go watch, like I said, go watch the podcast, go check it out. But I just wanted to mention a couple different things that was in the interview that James Gunn mentioned. Which, one of these things is his next project. We all wondering what his next project was going to be. And I kind of felt like it was going to be like a World's Finest. And he doesn't poo-poo the idea. He's very uncomfortable to really give the answer. He says no, but we have to remember that James Gunn lies. If you ever want to know if James Gunn's telling the truth, you just have to remember James Gunn lies. So you can't always know if he's telling the truth or not. I will say, though, reading an article where he lies versus seeing him in an interview is two different things. And you could tell that he was very uncomfortable with Josh Horowitz. And that Josh Horowitz was getting on to something. And James Gunn was very uncomfortable to say where that was. And so I wouldn't know to say it's necessarily a World's Finest movie. I don't even know if he'll call it World's Finest. Even though World's Finest would be a great title. That would be a great title. And he's even said in the past, if he did a Batman and Superman movie where they're together and it's just Batman and Superman, he would call it the World's Finest. Now, I kind of wonder if he's just going to call it the Trinity. And it's just going to be about Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. I'm not sure. But he says it does deal with Superman, but it's not going to be a traditional Superman sequel. Which I still hope we get a Superman sequel in the future where it's just about Superman. But for right now, I'm happy and intrigued about this. And I think it will be important for the future of the DC Universe to go ahead and broaden its wings. And you need someone like James Gunn probably to oversee something like that. So that was cool with me. The next thing we got to talk about, though, is poor Henry Cavill, man. And in this interview, James Gunn even admits that, like, he got the rough end of that stick, and that they really did screw Henry Cavill over, but honestly seemed to screw James Gunn and them over as well, because they had to give this bad news to this guy who just got told that he was going to continue with this role that he wasn't actually going to. And it seems that The Rock wasn't even in the picture. Now, that could just be beef between James Gunn and The Rock. I don't know. But he seems to kind of to address that The Rock was really trying to force his way into that role. And I'm really glad that he didn't get that role. Now, with James Gunn, has he been a little too involved? Yes, but when you find out how much he made for Superman, he's getting paid a lot to be involved. So maybe he was involved a little too much in the marketing of the film, where he was the focus. But I think if The Rock was leadership, every movie would have been about the Black Adam. Black Adam this, Black Adam that, Black Adam, Black Adam. Everything would have been about that. And that's not something we need. That's not something we needed in the DC Universe. I think everyone knew that. Everyone felt that. I liked the way he viewed some of the characters, like in the Justice Society, for example. But we definitely didn't need that type of atmosphere. And I think it really is messed up that they did that to Henry Cavill. And I think that's what led Henry Cavill removing himself from his management. Because his manager was the ex-wife of The Rock. And The Rock and her still work together business-wise. And it really does seem that Henry Cavill distanced himself afterwards because of that. And they mention in the interview, Josh Horowitz is like, hey, will you give him another shot in the movie? Like, is it too weird to have him as another character in the DC Universe? And James Gunn's like, absolutely not. Now, could James Gunn be lying? Sure, he could be lying. But I could see Henry Cavill doing another role. Now, if they ever try to do a true Ultraman, I think Henry Cavill would be great. I think that only works, honestly, if you bring all that original cast back as evil versions of themselves. And I don't think any of them necessarily want to do that and have no interest in doing that. Some of them probably feel scorned, like Gal Gadot probably feels scorned over James Gunn. But I would love to see Henry Cavill take another role. Honestly, he's not my pick for Batman. I have some other ideas for Batman. If they came out and said Henry Cavill was Batman, I wouldn't complain. It's not what I want, but I would not complain. I would be A-okay with that. And so, getting into the next part of the next thing I want to hit on, when it came to the interview, was this conversation about Batman. And if you're going to do two separate Batman, how are you going to separate this? And how are you going to do this? And they kind of clarified that they are going to not have two Batman movies in the same year. So if you're going to have Robert Pattinson still as Matt Reeves' Batman, totally separate from the DCU, you're going to have his movie come out one year, and then you're going to have another Batman movie maybe coming out the next year, which I think is smart. I selfishly do not want Robert Pattinson as the DCU Batman. I do not. And even hearing people who do want it, when you listen to them actually talk about it, they even admit how unrealistic that would be with the world that James Gunn has set up. But I am worried about two things. I'm worried about the box office of Superman. And I'm worried about people not understanding. There was a good interview with Kevin Feige where Kevin Feige joked about how people don't really understand the difference between DC and Marvel. And someone came up to Kevin Feige and said, "Congratulations on Blue Beetle." And Kevin Feige's like, "That's not my movie, that's DC." But he kind of gave the point that no one knows the difference. There's a lot of people out there, we know the difference. But there's a lot of people out there that don't know the difference. They don't spend their time thinking about this stuff, and they don't care. And so, if you have two different Batman, there's two different sides to that. There's the side of, well, if they don't care anyway, it doesn't really matter. But maybe they care enough, and if they care enough, maybe it'll be too confusing for them. Like I said, though, personally, I want those things to be separate. I want Robert Pattinson to be in his real world kind of atmosphere. And then I want another Batman to be in the DCU. I want a Batman in the DCU that can do something cooler than what Mr. Terrific did in that fight scene in Superman. And, you know, I love Robert Pattinson's Batman. I love what Matt Reeves is doing. But that's just not that Batman. It's just not. It's not that Batman. So I personally hope that that's something that they steer clear of. Now, clearly, even with the box office being what it is and the concerns of that box office, I think that overall they understand, the studio understands the climate they're in, that people aren't going to the movies like they used to, and that we're having to win them back. And so it doesn't seem like James Gunn's DC Studios is getting tortured or getting punished in the way that maybe you think they could have in the past. Because actually there's more opportunities and more shows that seem to be looking like getting a greenlit, which is Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen. Now, originally these were rumors that this was going on, but clearly this was something that James Gunn was planning. And Mr. Terrific seems to be getting possibly a movie or a show, and Jimmy Olsen as well. Now, we've gotten a little bit of information from Jimmy Olsen. We don't have much about Mr. Terrific. All we do know is that they have put out some copyright material, some trademark material for Mr. Terrific and Mr. Miracle. Now, Mr. Miracle is getting an animated series. It's going to be showrun by Tom King, based off of his acclaimed book. It's a book I have not read yet, his version of Mr. Miracle, but I have heard it's great. I have issues with Tom King, and I'm going to get into that with Mr. Terrific, but it's someone that clearly James Gunn really enjoys reading his work, really enjoys his work. He enjoys that deconstructionist type material. But from my understanding, that even though there's some deconstruction in Mr. Miracle, it really comes to a more positive outlook on the character and has a more positive story, because really it was like his love letter to Jack Kirby and to Stan Lee. And so I'm definitely more open. Same thing with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. That was made by Tom King as well. I'm more open to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I'm more open to Mr. Miracle than I am some of his other stories, which gets into Mr. Terrific. I have a feeling, if you're looking at what is the best Mr. Terrific story, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't necessarily know. But I will say the greatest thing about Strange Adventures that Tom King did was Mr. Terrific. And Mr. Terrific kind of was the lead of that. And when you're making a show or a movie, just making it a Mr. Terrific movie or a Mr. Terrific show, and then using Strange Adventures story that Tom King did, would make that story a little bit more digestible. I will say this. I'm concerned with that. I hated a story that really had me throughout the whole thing. I hated the ending of Strange Adventures. I really hated it. I've never felt disgusted with a story. I'm just being honest. And it's a story that James Gunn loves. James Gunn loves the story, but I've never felt more disgusted with a story than the ending of that story. I hated it. I hated it. And there's an aspect that deals with Mr. Terrific that I did not like as well. Now, I do feel like there was an arc there with Mr. Terrific, and they gave him a good arc at the end. But I do not like that story. I think it literally killed Adam Strange. I think it's like, who wants to do a story about Adam Strange now, basically? If you like try to get an Adam Strange book out right now, I don't think anyone's interested. I don't think anybody's interested, because Tom King literally murdered that character. So I just know that's probably where they're heading. And I'm not happy about that. I don't like that. But do I want to see something from Mr. Terrific? Yes. I remember Eddie Kithegi was talking about how he views Mr. Terrific as an atheist. And I will say this, if you know about Mr. Terrific's origin, the Spectre literally gives him guidance on becoming a hero. God's vengeance gives him guidance on being a hero. I don't know if DC would go that far with this, but I do think there could be an interesting story there where someone who doesn't believe in God was literally called, in a weird way, called by God to be a hero. I think there's an interesting story there. And dealing with loss and dealing with faith and belief and all those things. Do I trust Hollywood to tell that story well? Probably not. But it would be interesting to me to have the origins of Mr. Terrific and to dive deeper into that character. The one that I'm really interested in is Jimmy Olsen. Now, I think the two standouts in that movie, outside of Superman, really was, and maybe the Kents, was Jimmy Olsen and Mr. Terrific. I think both of those characters really shined and were really special. And Jimmy Olsen being this character where all these women are attracted to him and he doesn't understand why, but he's also kind of a schmuck. He's kind of a jerk, too, about it. And he has names for all these women that like him and stuff. He's like picky. He's overly picky. I think it's kind of funny. And he's an interesting character. And, people forget the importance of Jimmy Olsen. People forget that the Fourth World was introduced through Jimmy Olsen. That Darkseid was introduced through Jimmy Olsen. Put respect on the man's name. But, supposedly, the pitch for the show is that it's going to be an anthology series where every episode he is going to be like basically interviewing or dealing with a different DC villain. And one of those villains that they have talked about is Gorilla Grodd. And that lets you know that this could be interesting. Now, I don't mind a couple of heavies. Gorilla Grodd is a heavy. I don't mind a couple heavies, but I hope they put in some funny villains as well. Like, give me a Condiment King. Give me a Snowflame. Give me some of those characters as well that he goes in interviews. I think they could be really funny. And I'm okay with another heavy. Introduce Darkseid through my pal Jimmy Olsen. Because that's what you have to call it. You have to call it my pal Jimmy Olsen. But I'm totally down for that. I'm totally down for that. I'm very curious what you guys think of Jimmy Olsen. Do you think that's wasted time, wasted potential? Or do you think there's something special there? Because I think that's something that people would be open to watching. That's just me. Another show that I think we're going to see way before we see a Jimmy Olsen show, or way before we see even something with Mr. Terrific again, is I think we might be seeing something with Booster Gold now. From my understanding, they're just giving it a, very first episode before they greenlight. So it seems that maybe the scripts have been written for the show, but they're going to do the first episode pilot order. HBO is. They're going to give it that first episode order. They're going to see how it does. And if it does really well and they're happy with the first episode, then they're going to do more. And the show is going to be show ran, as long as it does well, it's going to be show ran by David Jenkins. Now, you may not know David Jenkins, and I wish I would have wrote down the show that he's responsible for, but there was that pirate show that had Taika Waititi in it. And it was kind of like a comedy. They had 2 seasons. Supposedly it was pretty funny. Not enough people watched it, so it ended up getting canceled. But I think they still want to stay in the relationship with David Jenkins because he's supposedly a really talented, creative guy. And so they're trying to stay in his good graces, and they gave him this shot with Booster Gold, and they're going to give it a shot. And we're just going to have to see how it goes. But Booster Gold might be coming sooner than we think. It might be the next TV show that we're going to see, because we're going to have Peacemaker, we're going to have Lanterns, and it looks like we might have this. And so I'm pretty excited about it. Now, to end off the movie news, this is the thing that blew my mind. This was the thing that when this happened, I looked at my wife and I said, I have to go sit down and I have to talk about this. This is too important not to talk about. And that is Zach Kreger has written a script for the DC Universe and plans on pitching it to James Gunn. Now, there's a video about 2 years ago. 2 years ago. There's a video where he makes comments about this script. And at the time, now, this was before he started working on the script and the movie that's coming out in August that I'm super excited about, called Weapons. And Weapons was supposedly like amazing. Supposedly it's fantastic. But before Weapons, there was this script, and he says it's the best script that he's ever done. It's the best script he's ever done. And from what we found out, that it is a Joker and a Harley Quinn script, but it follows a henchman. And I think I've talked about, I like this idea of these like $40 million movies, and just set up a $40 million movie that's totally different. It's a horror movie, but it's not a body horror movie. It's a different kind of horror movie. I think would be really interesting. Make us scared of the Joker. Make us scared of the Harley Quinn character. Make us scared of them before we see them in a Batman movie. I think if we see how vicious they can be, how evil they can be, how cruel they can be, I think when we finally see them and be involved with Batman, it'll give us a different perspective that we've never had before. And so, if this script, they said it was the best thing he ever written. Now, this was before Weapons. And if you don't know what happened with Weapons, the script for Weapons, there was a huge influx of studios just clawing to try to get that script. That it was like such a special script. They knew it was going to be such a great movie that literally Jordan Peele fired people that were supposed to be trying to buy the script. He fired them because they weren't able to get it. And Warner Brothers ended up getting it. So, just to give you perspective, this guy's a really good writer. If you've ever seen Barbarian, Barbarian was great. If you've ever seen The Whitest Kids You Know, back from the day, this guy can be hilarious as well. And I think he would be the perfect person to bring us the Joker. Now, is the Joker been overshown? Yes. But if the script's good, maybe James Gunn and them could be like, look, we love your script. Give us a couple years. And we would love to film this movie. Do other project. Do like 2 more projects, maybe. But just wait on us because we want you to do this for the DC Universe. Man, if they can make this work with Zach Cregger, it's just going to make directors start looking at DC in a deeper way. I remember Ben Affleck mocked them because, like, James Gunn lies. James Gunn was like, oh, we would love to work with Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck's going to do a movie with us for the DC Universe. When that was when they were kind of telling him, hey, buddy, you're not going to be Batman. And he was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in what they're doing. And it was kind of a negative. He put a negative outlook on what was going on with James Gunn. But if you get James Mangold, if you get Zach Cregger, if you can get someone like a director like Luca to come back and film for your universe, you got some heavy hitters, and it's going to make your studio look really interesting and look really like something that a director's director would want to be a part of. That sounds cool. I mean, the fact that James Gunn's good friends with Darren Aronofsky. Darren Aronofsky had a Plastic Man script that he wanted to do. There's a higher chance that we could see that Plastic Man script happening because of something like this. So, I think that's good news. I hope it works out. Do I want it to work out in the next year? No, I don't. But do I want maybe in a couple years us see maybe a Joker and Harley Quinn movie, but in the view of a henchman, and make it a horror movie? And make it like $40 million? Heck yeah! Like, there's a chance that movie might make $1 billion. Like the first Joker did. And it would only cost him $40 million. That's the type of thinking that's out there that I find really interesting and really cool. And so, guys, before we end the show, before we end this off, I got two questions. One, what comics are you guys reading right now? What are you reading? What are you into? I'm a little behind. I've been currently reading old school New Teen Titans. That's what I've been reading. I was reading Nightwing. I have a whole bunch of Nightwing I've been reading. As you can see, I'm a huge Nightwing fan. I was reading Chuck Dixon's Compendium, kind of going through that again. But I paused that for a second, and I decided to read the New Teen Titans. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been reading that, and I've been reading Mark Waid's like History of the DC Universe. I've been kind of going through that again, mainly for video. I have a video idea that I kind of want to talk about with that. But I'm curious, what are you guys reading? There seems to be a lot of stuff, especially with DC. The Absolute Universe, there's a lot of cool things that are out in DC right now. There's one negative thing, but I'm not going to talk about that in this show. But I'm very curious to hear what you guys are checking out and what you guys are reading and what you recommend that I check out. And the second thing I have to ask, are you guys playing any DC games? Now, we have our older classic games, and right now the biggest issue with DC is there's not a lot of great DC stuff that's out right now. I begrudgingly am playing the cell phone game of DC, trying not to spend any money on it. which is the Dark Legion game. I'm literally playing it right now, just going through the training simulator on it. And I'm a part of a league on there. You can actually find me at Embrace Nerd on that game. I thought about playing the Worlds Collide game because it's the only thing that DC's giving us. DC needs to give us better games. They need to give us better games, but that's what they've given us at the moment. So I'm just curious, anybody that decides to watch this, that watched this all the way through, which thank you, because this is a long episode, what did you think of it? Are you playing any DC games, and are you checking out these phone games? Are these phone games for you, or you know what they are? They're money pits. You're going to stay away from them. I would love to hear your comments down below. But guys, this was a great episode back. This is not going to be the usual schedule of the show. I'm going to have to figure that out. The goal is eventually to try to do this live. So guys, let me know what you thought of it. Drop your criticisms, comments, praises, whatever. I will take it all. Drop it down below. And I would love to hear your thoughts. And guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.